Here is another situation when you will have the signer fill a preliminary change of ownership report. It's in the case of a transfer between spouses, and more specifically when you have an Interspousal Transfer Grant Deed. So when you have such document, it basically means that the property of the transaction will be in one name and not in both names. So you see you have a document like this, for example. In this case, you will see that here Jane Doe is granting John Doe the following described property, and as is sole and separate property, meaning for a married couple the property will be only in one name. But in this case, when you have a purchase, at closing they need to fill this document here to technically remove one spouse, and it comes with a preliminary change of ownership report. So the info here, it's kind of the same as what we saw before. So again, here we have the name to the person who will have the property, and you see the seller transferor is, in this situation, it was his wife. So Jane is giving away actually her rights to own the property in a way. So then you fill up the same information here. So when it's for a purchase, it doesn't change much, so yes. When the people plan to occupy the property, same thing for the name, address, like we saw before. And in this one, this time, it's for the first question A. This transfer is solely between spouses. Addition or removal of a spouse, in this case. So this is when something is purchased. However, it works also when you just want to remove one person. So same thing, it will only be different here, like meaning since when you've been occupying the property. That's why here in this example I put 2005, for example. Alright, then on the second page there is not much to fill up. So usually I just do that straight through, and the bottom needs to be filled up. You see in this situation I put for a title transferee. Some people don't write anything, and that's okay as well, but it still needs to be signed, printed, date, and telephone, email, and title. I mean, if you can fill it up, great. If not, I guess that's okay as well. The PCOR that we saw before always goes together with the documentary transfer tax affidavit. When it's a transfer between spouses, just like we saw, usually there is nothing to pay, so it's always zero. And then you have to say why it's zero. So here it was filled up already, but usually it's not. So usually you check here over, and you see this conveyance establishes sole and separate property of a spouse. So that's good to keep this in mind, so you know what the signer should fill up here. And then at the bottom, it's pretty self-explanatory. The date, the city where this document was filled up. This document also works when there's a divorce. So during a divorce, obviously assets are separated. So when it's the case, it's just to remove the person that will not own this property anymore. So for example, in this case, if it was a divorce, Jane would be the person who would not own the property anymore. It would be John's property only. Here is my last example. It's a little bit similar to the previous one when it was a removal of a spouse, but in this situation it's when one of the spouse is deceased and it's to remove the deceased spouse. So for instance, let's say you have a property that someone wants to sell, but the seller technically on the paperwork shows, let's say, John Doe and Jane Doe, who purchased maybe this property like 20 years ago. In the meantime, one of the spouse died, so you want to remove this spouse. So in this situation, it would be, for example, Jane, because you see here it's John who is the surviving spouse that is named here. So like before, usually most of it is filled up except the phone number that you may have to ask the signer to fill. Then here, this property is intended as my principal residence. It can be yes. If it was just to remove this the spouse who passed, and since when they occupy the property. So here you see it's all 2005. And the same thing for taxes, the name of John Doe, his address. And then here it's like the previous document. On A we check yes, this transfer is solely between spouses, and in this case it's death of a spouse. And what is good to do as well, it's at the bottom when it shows over, you can have it checked as well, and you can add this. So this transfer is to remove the deceased spouse. And usually this document can go with a certificate of death that could be signed. In the previous section it was an interspousal transfer, in this case a certificate of death, for example. Not always, but it can happen. On the page 2, so you can either just cross everything and be done. I've seen a few times some escrow who would do this in part 2. They would check over here and they would add exactly the same thing as in page 1, transfer to remove the deceased spouse. Doesn't have to be done, but because it's kind of redundant, it already shows in page 1. But as I'm saying, I saw at least one escrow company doing that. And same escrow company, you see they were filling up again the information of the property, what it was, single family, no. But this again, it doesn't have to be filled up. It could just be crossed like that if you don't want to have anything filled up. And at the bottom again, so the affiant is signing, printing name, the date, telephone, email address, and title. And this, if you don't have it, that's okay, but it's always better to fill as much as possible. For the documentary transfer tax affidavit, it's just like when you remove a spouse in the interspousal, like we've seen before. Usually there is absolutely no fee, zero, and here you check over just before, but this time the reason is transfer to remove a deceased spouse, and same thing to fill up here.